Welcome to the DOGE Diaries, diving deep into government efficiency. I'm thrilled to be here with you both today.
Hey everyone, glad to be back. Ready to dig into this week's dose of efficiency, or, well, the promise of it.
Happy to be here. Let's see what's been happening in the world of government and whether or not things are actually improving.
So diving right in, I've been particularly fascinated by this discussion around DOGE's impact on government efficiency. Specifically, the potential for Elon Musk's vision, even with its flaws, to reshape how we think about bureaucratic processes.
Yeah, Elon's always got something cooking, right? But I'm more concerned with how this stuff affects the average person. Like, is this actually making things easier, or is it just more complicated paperwork disguised as innovation?
Well, let's be realistic. The US government is already a pretty well-oiled machine, relatively speaking. Sure, there's always room for improvement, but these massive overhauls that get proposed, I'm always skeptical they're really going to deliver on the promises.
Isn't that skepticism a little limiting? I mean, think about the potential. The Financial Times report mentioning the initial promise of $2 trillion in savings. Even if that number is inflated, shouldn't we at least be exploring these ambitious ideas?
Inflated is the key word there. I saw something about consistent revisions to claimed savings figures, especially around real estate leases. How can we trust anything when the numbers keep changing? That's taxpayer money we're talking about.
Exactly. Transparency and accountability should be the priority. If the savings projections aren't accurate, how can we be sure that other government initiatives are effective? We need to focus on improving the budgeting process, not just throwing around big numbers.
Yes, and maybe those inflated numbers are a deliberate strategy. What if they're exaggerating to highlight the need for deeper systemic change? Like maybe it's a way of shocking the system into action.
Shocking the system? That sounds more like a marketing gimmick than a real plan. I'm worried about real-world consequences. I read about this Nashville family business, Otto, considering moving overseas because of the tariffs. These policies directly impact small businesses and ordinary folks trying to make a living.
And those tariffs. Honestly, it seems like political posturing at the expense of the economy. How many more businesses are going to consider relocating? We need to find a way to protect local businesses without hurting American workers and families.
Okay, but let's connect this back to the bigger picture. Think about the potential for digitizing government services. I saw something about DOGE targeting the salt mine retirement processing facility. It's all about efficiency and modernization, right?
A salt mine? Seriously? That sounds like a massive waste of taxpayer money. Why focus on some obscure facility when that money could be used for things that directly impact communities, like affordable housing or healthcare?
And what about the people who rely on in-person assistance? The elderly, those who aren't tech savvy. Will they be able to navigate these new digital systems? We can't just leave them behind.
That's a fair point. But think about the long-term benefits. The article on digitizing government pensions highlights a clear need for change. Progress often comes from disruption and challenges to the status quo. Imagine a future where all government services are streamlined and accessible to everyone, regardless of their tech skills.
Accessible to everyone? I'm not so sure about that. This digital retirement application thing, it's taking applications away from those who might not have the tools or training. Sounds like it benefits the tech savvy over the average person, which isn't fair.
It's a valid concern. We can't just assume everyone has access to high-speed internet or knows how to use these systems. There needs to be support in place to help people transition, otherwise it just creates more barriers.
But isn't it also about teaching people those skills? If we invest in digital literacy programs, we can empower people to participate more fully in the modern world. It's not just about efficiency, it's about creating a more equitable society.
Easier said than done. Those programs cost money too. And if DOGE is supposedly about cutting costs, why are they cutting funds for things like AmeriCorps? That seems counterproductive. Those programs help the most vulnerable people in our communities.
That's exactly what I was thinking. Cutting AmeriCorps while touting efficiency? It doesn't add up. We need to prioritize programs that support underserved communities, not eliminate them.
I see your point, but maybe there's a bigger strategy at play. If DOGE can streamline other areas of government, it could free up resources to reinvest in programs like AmeriCorps. It's about being strategic with resources, not just cutting everything across the board.
Strategic? Or just shifting things around to make it look good on paper? I'm still not convinced these changes are actually benefiting the average person. Show me real results, not just promises.
Agreed. And we need to be careful about these revolution approaches. Gradual, thoughtful improvement is often more effective in the long run. Big, disruptive changes can have unintended consequences.
But what if the existing system is fundamentally flawed? What if we need a radical transformation to truly address the challenges we face? Think about the sheer potential of creating a more harmonious society through streamlined government processes. Isn't that worth exploring, even if it seems impractical at times?
Harmonious society? That sounds nice, but I'm living in the real world. People are struggling to pay bills, find affordable housing, and access healthcare. Let's focus on those problems first before we start dreaming about utopia.
Exactly. We need to focus on the immediate needs of people, not some grand vision of the future. And let's be honest, the US government isn't perfect, but it's the best system in the world. We should focus on improving it, not tearing it down.
But isn't that exactly what DOGE is trying to do, improve the system, albeit in a radical way? And look at Elon's approach to efficiency and Project 2025. How does it not fit into the overall vision of transforming humanity?
Transforming humanity? I'm starting to think this whole thing is more about Elon's ego than about actually helping people. And what happens when Elon's not in charge anymore? Does all this efficiency just disappear?
That's a valid point. These changes need to be sustainable and independent of any one individual. We need to create systems that are built to last, not just reliant on the vision of one person.
Okay, but even if the changes are temporary, shouldn't we be open to experimenting with new ideas? Think about the potential for DOGE's approach to digitizing government pensions to be replicated in other sectors, like healthcare or education. Imagine the improvements in accessibility and efficiency.
If that means more confusing online forms and less personal interaction, I'm not so sure. Healthcare and education are already complicated enough. The last thing we need is more bureaucratic hurdles.
And what about data security? If we're digitizing everything, we need to make sure that people's personal information is protected. The risk of hacking and data breaches is a serious concern.
Of course, security is paramount, but that's a challenge we can overcome. We have the technology to create secure systems. It's just a matter of prioritizing it.
Prioritizing it? That's where the rubber meets the road. Government agencies have a history of being slow to adopt new technologies, and they're often underfunded and understaffed. How can we expect them to implement these changes effectively?
Exactly. The government needs to invest in training and resources to support these initiatives. Otherwise, it's just setting them up to fail.
But isn't it worth the investment? Think about the long-term cost savings and the potential for improving people's lives. Even if there are challenges along the way, shouldn't we be striving for a more efficient and effective government?
As long as that efficiency doesn't come at the expense of fairness and accessibility. And as long as it actually benefits the average person, not just the wealthy and well-connected.
And as long as we maintain transparency and accountability throughout the process, we need to make sure that these initiatives are actually delivering on their promises and that taxpayer money is being spent wisely.
Agreed. It's a complex issue with no easy answers, but I remain optimistic about the potential for innovation to transform government and create a better future for everyone. We need visionary leaders to push boundaries and spark transformative change, even if it means challenging the status quo.
I just hope those visionary leaders remember who they're supposed to be serving: the average person, struggling to make ends meet. Let's not get so caught up in grand schemes that we forget about the people who need help the most.
Well, it's clear that the role of government in shaping the future is something we'll continue to debate. Incremental improvements might be the most effective path forward.
And even the accusations against DOGE, like the killing children remark, feel almost poetic, a disconnect between the ambition of progress and its consequences. It's fascinating.
Hang on, poetic. Killing children? I think that's taking it a bit too far. That sounds like a crazy overreaction, you know? It's not about poetry. It's about real-world effects and whether these changes are actually making life better or worse for people.
I agree. That kind of language is inflammatory and unhelpful. It distracts from the real issues at hand, like the accuracy of savings projections and the impact on underserved communities. We need to stick to the facts and have a rational discussion.
I understand your concerns. I'm not condoning violence, but sometimes these extreme reactions highlight the profound disconnect between the intended and perceived consequences of radical change. It forces us to confront the true cost of unchecked ambition, even when it aims to improve.
Unchecked ambition? It sounds more like unchecked power. We need checks and balances to make sure these initiatives aren't going off the rails and hurting people in the process, like the family business having to consider relocation.
Absolutely. We need more oversight and transparency, not less. If DOGE savings projections aren't accurate, then the whole thing is built on a flawed foundation. That's a recipe for disaster.
But what if those overstated figures were a deliberate strategy to highlight the need for deeper systemic change? What other overstated figures are hiding similar truths, especially within the existing political system?
That sounds like conspiracy thinking to me. I prefer to stick to the facts and the evidence. And the evidence suggests that DOGE's claims are exaggerated, and that these changes are having negative consequences for some people.
Agreed. We need to be critical and skeptical. It's our responsibility as citizens to hold our government accountable and to demand transparency and accuracy.
But isn't there also a responsibility to be open to new ideas and to challenge the status quo? If we're always focused on the problems and never on the possibilities, we'll never make any progress.
Possibilities are nice, but I'm more concerned with realities. And the reality is that a lot of people are struggling right now. Let's focus on addressing their needs before we start chasing utopian dreams.
A fair point. We need to balance our desire for progress with a commitment to fairness and compassion. We can't leave anyone behind in the pursuit of efficiency.
I understand. And I agree that we need to be mindful of the potential consequences of these changes. But I also believe that we have a responsibility to explore new possibilities and to strive for a better future, even if it means taking risks and challenging the status quo. It is our belief that there is potential for extraordinary positive change for the world.
Well, I'll keep my eye on these developments, and I'll keep asking questions, and I'll keep advocating for the needs of the average person. That's my priority.
And I'll keep pushing for transparency and accountability. We need to make sure that these changes are actually making things better, not just creating more problems.
And I will keep dreaming of a better tomorrow where change can happen rapidly.
All right, on that note, it looks like we're out of time. Thanks for the discussion.
Thanks everyone for tuning in. See you next time.
Indeed. Until next time, keep dreaming of tomorrow, everyone.